What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Emerson Latzia back with us here in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. Got another banger for you guys in the hopper. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating, and check us out live here on DraftKings YouTube, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, and more. We've got Carlos Boozer stopping by, former NBA veteran, former Duke legend. Got a new book dropping out to tell us about here. Some great stories from his childhood. Got a chance to chop it up with him in a little bit before. We've also got today, Dad, bringing back an oldie but goodie here. I make no bones, I stole this directly from your time on Mike and Mike here, firing up the grill for some hashtag grill Golics. We got great mailbag questions from everybody today.
You know, Mike and Mike has been over for a while now, so I think are we past the intellectual property? Can we start stealing more things from that show? Maybe we'll get a Bob Picozzi Did You Nosy in there as well. I mean, we got some roads we can go down with that, because I think we're past that time we can start using it. I have no idea.
Hell,
I'm just making that up.
Why don't we just rename the show Mike and Mike?
Well, we need too much. Oh yeah,
Believe me, we heard that from enough people.
How about it?
And listen, it is technically yours, so it's not really stealing. It's inside a house that you bought and lived in. So. Boom. We can rock with all that. We'll get to those. We appreciate everybody at GoJo and Golic on Twitter who sent us some questions that way as well. So looking forward to getting to plenty of those, Dad. And looking forward to, unfortunately now, after yesterday, we talked about the excitement for postseason baseball in the wild card round, and it's gone. We went wild card sweeps across the board. And so as Emerson pointed out before the show, y'all gonna have to sit here and like this Bears and Commanders Thursday night game and eat your vegetables, because baseball is not gonna come and save you today.
Yeah, I was somewhat amazed. All 4 games, you got a lot of baseball in the last couple of games. I never saw the full attendance in Tampa Bay. I know game 1 was 19,000. I don't know what game 2 was there at all. It seemed the only real, if you want to call it controversy or moment, because, you know, the games, Texas beat Tampa pretty good, 7-1, Arizona 5-2 over Milwaukee, Philly 7-1 over Miami, but Minnesota 2-1 over Toronto. Jose Barrios was pitching extremely well in his game. Shutout in 3 innings, threw 47 pitches, walked the first batter in the 4th inning, and got pulled. I mean, John Snyder had basically, the manager, said, you know, we were ready to use all our pitchers and do what we needed to do to get the win. And you pull a guy who was throwing pretty damn well and just 47 pitches in. And what happened when they pulled him out in the 4th inning? Minnesota scored both their runs, and they won 2-0. So that's going to be a lot of the talk of those who are going to talk a lot of baseball today of second guessing, and they were even saying first guessing at the time of why that move happened. But onward we go to the DSs in both leagues now.
Yep, time to throw some D's on that thing and get on to the next round. Yeah, listen, we got close, but we didn't get there all the way. Instead, Dad, what we've got to look forward to, and we've talked about the quarter mark of the NFL season, everything that's coming up here, there's a lot of interesting potential bubbling up in the league right now. We're at that point where there's going to be a few teams that pull out of the tailspin that they're in, and there's a few teams that have emerged onto the stage, and some of them are going to get the cavalry back. And we got some really interesting injury news of players potentially coming back and trying to make their debut this week. And while I want to ask you about the most important player returning from injury this week, because I actually think it's a pretty clear answer, but it's by no means the most interesting answer at this point, because we've got Jonathan Taylor back in the building right now for the Indianapolis Colts, returned to practice on Wednesday. We still haven't heard from him necessarily, Dad, or really much about his situation with the Colts, because remember, it's been months now since we've talked to Jonathan Taylor or heard anything from him about this situation. And we don't know if the relationship's any different behind closed doors, but Dad, this is no doubt an impact walking back into their building if you can get him back on the field. It's just a matter of physically, it's been a question this entire time of what and actually how much is wrong with Jonathan Taylor right now.
Well, you know, and what's his attitude toward the Colts? Because he's the one that requested a trade, right? And so now all the reports, as you mentioned, and correctly so, we haven't heard from him yet, and we will, but Shane Steichen and anybody reporting about it is saying, oh, he's thrilled to be back. Well, okay, we haven't heard that from him. And last we did hear from his camp, he wanted the hell out of the Colts. So what could have changed? Well, I think it's pretty obvious what could have changed. Why did Saquon Barkley agree to the one-year deal? Why did Josh Jacobs agree to the one-year deal? You got no leverage. You know, they weren't trading him, or if they were asking for too much, and that wasn't going to happen. And he was going on the PUP list, so he was going to miss the first 4 games anyway. He realizes that his best option is to play. You know, you can't pull in the NFL what you can pull in the NBA with what James is doing. At least I don't believe you can to the extent the basketball players can do it. So I think Jonathan Taylor realizes that I need to play to show what my worth is, even though we all know what is a hell of a running back, and the running back position is in a dire place right now with the money they're making. So yeah, I think he realizes his best option is to get back on the field and show everybody what he could do. And by the way, I mean, everybody is 2-2 in that division.
Yeah.
And now you're matching him up with Anthony Richardson, who I've been saying all along, why didn't you do a deal with JT to get these 2 young players together? So it will be interesting, what kind of shape he's in and when he can play and get back on the field. I'm sure he's going to want to play right away. But I think that's the reason that we're hearing he's excited to come back and play. Again, we don't know if he really is. I think this was the best option for him to get what he wants, is either out of the Colts or a long-term deal. And the best way to do that, I think, is to go out and play really good football.
Junior, I think he 100% saw Anthony Richardson, his potential, and was like, oh, yeah, that trade request, never mind. And you nailed it, Golic. He looked at the state of the division. Everyone's 2-2, and he's like, wait, this thing is winnable? Yeah, sure, would love to come back.
Yeah, I guess to an extent, the interpersonal part of this is going to be amazing, but the football part of it you mentioned is pretty easy to see, because it's not just Anthony Richardson, who at this point is Anthony Richardson, 6th in the NFL in rushing touchdowns with 6 on the season so far, I believe, and also averaging over 5 yards a carry. Like, this dude's gone out and shouldered the load. He's made some really impressive throws along the way, and as that gets more dialed in and consistent, you've also got an offense that's leaned on the run game enough. Like, I looked up today, Zach Moss is 4th in the NFL in yards per game right now. And Zach Moss is a good, solid running back. Liked him coming out of Utah. He spent his time in Buffalo before this, but by no means a world beater. Dad, we talked about this with Devon Achane the other day about guys that factor into the running back conversation in certain ways based on where they were picked and how productive they've been, and what that sends and underscores as a message about this position and late round value and all the things that we know when we've had these conversations about. But to now get into this backfield potentially with a guy that, if you're Jonathan Taylor, and we're trying to figure out the win for him, right? Because all those other guys you mentioned, Dad, got some sort of reworked deal, got something added as a sweetener to the pot, even if it wasn't ultimately what we wanted. We're still kind of waiting to hear, is there anything like that in the works? Is Jonathan Taylor going to walk back with his tail between his legs and get nothing in a situation that's been pretty toxic as far as the public back and forth between both sides here? That'd be pretty difficult unless you're Jonathan Taylor and you look at this and you see the opportunity, because all that team stuff is great, but we do know there's a personal side to this. And if he comes back and says, hey, with the way Anthony Richardson has taken some of the heat off us, which we said running backs around the league are getting a benefit from mobile quarterbacks, maybe Jonathan Taylor looks and says, all right, you combine that with the O-line playing a little bit better, although they've been a little bit banged up at the beginning of the season here. Maybe this can give me the kind of production that gives me a better shot at taking another crack at this after this season, with a little bit of time separated from when we went through all of this pain and rigmarole to now.
Yeah, Listen, I think he's in the position like most running backs are. You mentioned Zach Moss, not a world beater, but 10th in the league, as you mentioned, in rushing. He's averaging over 4 yards a carry, and they're all 2-2 in that division. We have seen other running backs who have been drafted later, not first-round backs, come in and produce, and all of a sudden, not necessarily Wally Pipp, the starter and the higher draft pick, but at least show everybody that says maybe you don't need that first rounder. But Jonathan Taylor at his best, listen, any team would want him. But like I said, I think they're in that position, or he's in that position. And I do think it's more about himself than about the team. And I get it. You're trying to secure your future with the best contract you can get. So I do understand that. We'll see where it goes. I think the matchup is great with he and Anthony Richardson in the backfield. But to your point, I don't know where it's going to go from a financial standpoint. Remember, the Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkleys of the world, while we can say they got more in incentives. I mean, it was really, they lost their battle. Let's put it that way.
They did, but they got something out of it, the way that we still haven't seen for Jonathan, right? And I would say of all the ones that we've talked about so far, Dad, they all certainly were public dialogues, but it felt like there was the most venom in this situation because you had the owner speaking out. Like Saquon Barkley was pretty public in the way that he talked about things, pretty public in the discussion, and he was the biggest star of them because he's in New York, because of the way he came into the league. But Jonathan Taylor's, it felt like this one, we always talk about, the business versus personal. This one felt personal in a lot of ways around that organization. So that's the only reason I even bring it up.
No, there's no doubt it did. And that was a lot of it caused by an owner in Irsay who likes to talk, who likes to tweet, likes to say things publicly. And I don't think there's any doubt, that it turned that relationship a bit sour. We don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes. But like I've always said, there are a few things that can repair bridges. And one is if you pay a guy and he gets his money, then all of a sudden everything's hunky-dory. And number two is you have to come maybe to a self-realization that I lost this battle of requesting a trade or getting a new deal. And the only way I can eventually win in this situation is not by sitting out, but by getting on the field and again, showing everything that I could do. And I'm sure there are players that scratch their head and say, why do I need to do that? I already showed you how good I am on the field. But as we know, this is as most things are, what have you done for me lately?
Well, I look at it, Dad, as it's not like losing a battle. It's an even more nihilist view, which is this is not a fight you can win right now if you're that player. There's very little you can do, especially if injuries factored into your early timeline at all as a running back, to overcome the math and perception right now around the league. The league held steady. The owners, everyone there. I'm not suggesting collusion, but I'm suggesting a common idea that's been bought by everyone. It's a groupthink about that position right now. And so it's gotten them in that position that they are. So that's going to be fascinating from the interpersonal side, Dad. I am much more interested in Cooper Kupp's return with Los Angeles Rams.
I agree.
Like if we're looking at what the potential biggest impact is, because it's going to be an uphill battle. The Indianapolis Colts, like Emerson said, everyone's 2-2. It's a dogfight in the AFC South, but I don't see that necessarily being a multiple playoff team division as we talk about a crowded AFC picture. In the same way that we look at the NFC, and all of a sudden, if you're the Los Angeles Rams, who currently sit at third in the NFC West, but have a positive point differential early in the year, have a win head-to-head against the Seahawks inside that division, you're a very real wild card contender going forward. I'm going to firmly put the 49ers in the driver's seat and say they probably are going to go ahead and win that thing again, but for the Rams and what they've done, Matthew Stafford has been a full participant this week, got a little bit banged up in this last game with the hip injury. But if you pair Cooper Kupp, if he's healthy enough to come back, and this seemed like a lot less likely during camp when we're hearing all about the hamstring injury and potential nerve pain and all that stuff, paired that with Puka Nacua, who's on an unprecedented, unholy tear to begin his NFL career, looks like he could be the runaway offensive rookie of the year, maybe battling with CJ Stroud. Dad, all of a sudden, this is not only a wild card team potentially, but one that's in danger of going and being a tough out for anyone they're going to play in the postseason, because you've still got a guy like Matthew Stafford at the helm who's got that meaningful playoff experience, who knows how to handle that.
Yeah, it was. Do you think Puka is going to go to Sean McVay and say, "Hey, this Cooper Kupp dude isn't going to take catches away from me, is he?"
What are we thinking about here? This old man with a banged up hamstring is going to come back and stop Puka?
I'm the man here, right? But I completely agree with you. This is the guy coming back, because this team has surprised us. We didn't think the Rams were going to be this team, this young, and all the moves that they had to make, but here they are. And I agree, not winning the division, but certainly could be in that wild card race. And for Cooper Kupp, we know his routes. They like the longer routes. You have to see what, the building up to full speed to get that. As you mentioned, the reports are that it wasn't as serious a long-term thought process with this hammy as believed, but you still got to keep an eye on it, man. I mean, you got to pull up one time and you're out for another few weeks. That's the problem, especially with a wide receiver and a hamstring. But getting him back, because it still blows my mind, guys like him and Justin Jefferson, who are getting the ball, yet they still get the ball. So what a tandem between he and Puka. Throw Tutu Atwell in there. He's a second leading receiver on the Rams right now. And and Kyron Williams getting the play in the backfield now, averaging under 4 yards a carry, but got 5 touchdowns. He's been that guy by the goal line early on, but him getting a chance out there. So these young players stepping up to really help out the older players in Stafford, and now Cooper Kupp, considered an older player compared to those guys, to come back and help this team.
Yeah, I give everyone in the Rams brass a lot of credit, because we hear a lot of complaining about veteran quarterback contracts and what they do to a roster and what you're forced to do. The Rams, it wasn't just that they, mortgaged a bunch of picks and brought Matthew Stafford over. They mortgaged a bunch of picks for Jalen Ramsey, for everybody else. They burned the boats on this thing, and they were forced. There was only one way the Rams were going to get out of this, and that was by hitting in the draft on their non-first round picks and building up and getting guys ready to play early. And between what we've seen early in the season from Steve Avila on their offensive line, Atwell, who's a second or third year player, Puka coming in as a first year player, and the guys on defense, Byron Young, some of the other players that have stepped up there, the Rams have done it and now look like a really competitive football team going towards the rest of the season. And I'm not going to overvalue what Cooper Kupp is going to come back and be right away, right? Like Sean McVay and everybody, they're towing the company line. They're taking this slow. They're letting him ramp back up to it. And hopefully you can't put all that back on his plate early, especially coming off that kind of injury. But, Dad, any version of Cooper Kupp paired with what we've gotten right now seems like an offense that can continue to go out there and be a bit of a shredder on its best day.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. Tough form this next game, playing the Eagles. Then they have the Cardinals, the Steelers, and then the Cowboys. So, as you mentioned, 2-2 in that division. Let's see what, if nothing else, and the opponent's going to want to find out where Cooper Kupp is. But if he's anywhere near to what he could be, I mean, just that threat and how it's going to help the other receivers as well, because of the personnel you have to put on Cooper Kupp. So this is a big coup for them in what I would have to say, and I don't know if you agree, probably the most surprising team. I mean, they're 2-2. It's not like they're 4-0, but still the way they're playing, to me, they're one of the more, if not the most surprising team this year to the good.
Yeah, I think we can put a pin in that. Surprise teams in the NFL for this season, and maybe get to that coming up here, because I think there's one very clear choice in that category that you've heard us talk about a lot on this show. But Emerson, we'd be remiss if we're talking about injuries and acquisitions if we didn't mention the foremost money laundering scheme that is the New England Patriots pump and dump scam that they run with veteran players, as J.C. Jackson now heading back home.
Yeah, that's right. So J.C. Jackson's going to get a fresh start in a familiar place here, Junior, and it was a necessary move because the Patriots are going to be without rookie corner Christian Gonzalez for the rest of the season. He suffered a torn labrum during Sunday's loss to the Cowboys here. But J.C. Jackson headed back to New England. The two teams, the Chargers and the Pats, are going to be swapping late-round draft picks in 2025. No one is better with late-round draft picks than Bill Belichick, Jr.
Well, and they get him for the cheap. They rework the rest of his salary, so they're only paying about $1.5 million for a player, Dad, who's struggled mightily, but this is what the Patriots do, right? Trey Flowers, Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy, Trent Brown. They're not new to this. They're true to this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Lose a guy in a trade or in free agency and bring him back at less. Jackson just signed a 5-year, $82.5 million deal last offseason. Yeah. I mean, these big deals with these guys, we can get into Randy Gregory at some point in Denver, signed the big deal, and these players are gone or have moved on or have been released or traded. It's amazing, but Bill doing Bill things.
Undrafted guy, so good for him.
Love to see him get to that money. But coming up next, speaking of getting to that money, let's hear about the entrance of the finesse god in the NBA next.
Going to be awesome.
Daryl Morey is a liar, and I would never be a part of an organization that he's more than.
James Harden has not showed up to training camp and media day for the Philadelphia Sixers.
When you blast the GM the way you blasted him,
Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar.
that would seem you would get your way and get out. Right now, he's not. He is that squeaky wheel.
He's wiggled himself out of a lot of situations, and you don't get infinite wiggles.
He called Daryl Morey a liar and claimed he would never be a part of an organization that he is still a part of right now. So yesterday, Harden, I guess, gentlemen, ends up being the one who ultimately proved to be untruthful. He reported the 76ers training camp in Colorado, taking part in his first practice of the season for Morey's 76ers. And by all accounts, listen to this, Harden was perfectly professional.
Huh?
Yeah.
Not necessarily what I would have expected there, Dad. And this is something that I have no read on what to even predict or begin to predict in this scenario with James Harden other than what we've seen before. But man, to hear him back in the building now after all that, you just feel like we're sitting on a ticking time bomb. Like this is a sleeper agent that's now inside the building. There's no handbook for this for the rest of the team, for the people in the organization, let alone to handle what might be an icy interaction if him and Daryl Morey ever cross paths in the middle of all this. If he's around training camp, which you'd expect maybe the GM might be at some point. Although I'd wonder if there's like an unspoken, hey, we're just going to need you to stay away in the early going here while James is around, because everyone's walking around on eggshells. Like what a toxic environment to try and begin your season in for a team. Oh, by the way, that's the one team in the Eastern Conference, maybe outside of the Miami Heat, that's looking around watching all of their chief competition and rivals get demonstrably better because of the Damian Lillard trade, and trying to navigate this while they also try and figure out how to beat that.
Nick Nurse probably misses Toronto right now as he's the new coach in Philadelphia. On a bucking Bronco trying to answer these questions. I mean, I love some of his answers. He said he talked to Harden just a little bit before practice, that he was professional, blah, blah, that whole thing. But they have a first preseason game against the Celtics on Sunday, and asked about his availability. I love Nurse's answer about him being there. I think so. He's here. He knows the schedule. We expect him to be here. I think we can wait and see where things go from here. But every indication is that he's here now. I mean, Nick Nurse has to just be like, this is what I got to deal with. And you're right about Daryl Morey. What do you do in that situation? Do you flex and say, I'm the GM, I'm going to go wherever I want? I don't care if it's uncomfortable. It's not my fault. I wasn't called a liar, publicly. This guy did it. I have no idea. We didn't hear if he was there. Maybe he is staying away. All I know is they had a cool moment there. They had a dinner there, and Deion Sanders spoke at the dinner and hung out with the players for a while. That had to be kind of a cool thing for them.
I want to ask you about that, Dad, actually, because I saw an interesting reaction to that from JJ Redick, our colleague here at DraftKings, host of Old Man and the Three. He tweeted this yesterday about that. I grew up in the NBA. The teams I was on, we had plenty of motivational speakers. Some of them I really took a lot from, and a few were impactful for our team. None of those talks were recorded and then posted to social media. What are we doing now? Is the locker room not sacred anymore? This is the most old man on a porch I've ever heard from JJ Redick at this point, because I'm pretty sure this video came out from Deion Sanders' camp that's filming everything at this point. It's a giant content factory. And I agree with JJ on a lot of other places on this, right? When we see guys in the locker room after games that'll go on like Instagram Live or Facebook Live while the coach is addressing the team, that's always the one that nerves me out a little bit. I mean, hell, we saw the reaction from Dan Lanning in a video that he knew was being shot in the pregame locker room going into that Oregon-Colorado game, let alone a coach who's addressing his team, usually fired up after a game. I always worry a little bit about what's getting said there. That to me did seem like harmless PR for what was clearly PR for everyone. You got Deion Sanders coming right now, one of the hottest names in the world of sports at the moment, coming and hanging out with the team, and also a guy who's just infinitely cool, who any of those guys would want to hang out with anyway.
Oh, that's exactly right. So I'm with you. I agree with JJ on a lot of things. This one, not so much. I mean, we've seen other video of speakers coming in and talking to teams, whether it's college or pros. We've seen that happen before. I don't think that's a sacred thing that should be in the locker room. This is at a team dinner. So I think we're obviously in a different time right now, and Deion is the hot name right now, and everybody knew that was being filmed. So I had absolutely zero issue. I didn't read any more into it. Then they all got to hang out with Deion for a while, so I thought that was pretty cool. For that moment, they have a lot bigger issues than having to worry about that being a public thing. But I thought that was cool. But where this Harden thing goes, man, I have no idea. Again, the power of the players. What will Harden do to try and get out of there? Is he just going to play nice and hope he gets traded, or is he going to start to become that squeaky wheel?
Yeah, Junior, I was going to ask you, for the time being, cooperating, is it in Harden's best interest here? Like, if he comes in causing more problems for yet another team after already forcing his way out of the likes of Houston and Brooklyn, that could potentially scare other interested parties away, yes?
I mean, everything about James Harden walking into this, James Harden's like a poisonous frog walking into the woods. You know those colors usually mean something dangerous is about to happen to you. How can you look at James Harden's recent history and go, oh yeah, this bad thing won't happen to me, is beyond me at this point. So as far as what's in James Harden's best interest at this point, like, I understand, Dad, going all the way back to the root of this, why James Harden is actually upset, right? When you look at the circumstances, him opting back into the agreement this year instead of going and flexing his player option to get to free agency because of what they thought the team was going to do for him and then what didn't come to fruition. But handling it like this on the back end, to Emerson's point, always going to feel like a net negative, because we talked about it the other day. You only get so many wiggles in this league for a player who is only getting older and whose skill set is only going to start to erode more and more as time goes on.
Yeah, and the players, Tobias Harris said, we're all grown men here. Everybody understands the business of the game of basketball at this point. Personally, he doesn't have to address myself or anybody around here. He said, but his participation, in my opinion, is addressing that. He's here, and his attitude and energy today allowed everybody to understand that he wants to go out here and compete with us and get stuff done. So that's what coming from a player. We'll see, because that's what and he's right about, and that's true in all sports. You never mess with another man's money. And in this case, it's not money or where he wants to play. It's a personal decision, but it can affect the team. If you're preparing this year with James Harden to be on the team and all of a sudden he's gone and gets traded, your team dynamics change, so and I'm sure they all in the back of their minds, probably in the front of their minds, understand that that's a likely possibility and to be ready to go without him. But you kind of, as the preseason rolls on, depending if he stays there and he's involved in playing, and then you're getting used to him playing. Now, I know he was there last year, but you're used to that groove, and then that ends, you got to deal without it. It puts the players in an interesting situation, but players will never really say anything again, because it's somebody else's world. It's somebody else's business. It's a business decision. And you just kind of let players do that.
I mean, for those guys, it would just be about, hey, what kind of team are we going to be on the other side of this either way, especially if they're able to move Harden? Because the one thing we always talked about, Dad, was that's a move for the 76ers when it came to the thought process of, do you pay James Harden the money that he wants again? Because you've got no other choices right now. And you want to talk about really being backed into a corner in the current Eastern Conference. On DraftKings Sportsbook, they're tied with the Clippers at plus 1,800 for, I guess, what would be the 7th best odds to win the championship this season, with Boston and Milwaukee sitting tied for first plus 400 right now. Everyone kind of looks at the upper crust of that conference, and you look and say, all right, in the Milwaukee Bucks case, we think they got better, adding Damian Lillard, who at this point still feels like a better player offensively than Drew Holiday in a lot of ways. But for the Boston Celtics, you could argue, listen, you lost Marcus Smart, who was a great two-way player for you, but you're getting in Drew Holiday, I think, a more competent offensive player overall, well-rounded in skill set, and one who could still go out there and check the other team's best player in the backcourt on any given night. So both those teams found a way to get better, while the 76ers right now feel like they're going to get worse no matter what.
And even with Harden, remember last year, he played big in some games, but disappeared in others, just wasn't consistent in the playoffs.
It's going to be interesting. Coming up next, let's take a look and find out where the rubber's going to meet the road as the Bears take on the Commanders Thursday Night Football.
Buckle up for Thursday Night Football. Yeah, the Bears have been as putrid as their 0-4 record indicates. You're looking at the injury reports for tonight. The Washington Commanders, mostly healthy, baby. That's right, it's Thursday. You know what that means. Kick off your NFL weekend with Thursday Night Football on Prime. It is on. Junior, not quite sure what your expectations are for tonight, but something needs to be done in Chicago if the Bears want to turn things around. Some say head coach could be fired and out of town if they embarrass themselves once again like they did last week in that 21-point coughing up of the lead.
Yeah, outside of the Giants right now, the Chicago Bears own the worst point differential in the NFL. You're coming off a game, Dad, where you did have a little bit of hope did come through in the form of Justin Fields and what he did offensively. We talked with Ryan Fitzpatrick about that yesterday. And how much of that do you think they're able to build on in this game? Because we know the offense has certainly been an issue, but defensively, it's not like you've been a great team either. We talked about this is the most sacked team in football in the Washington Commanders going up against the team that sacks the quarterback the least in the Chicago Bears that have two on the season so far. Because it's a primetime game, Dad, what Emerson said, I think holds a little bit more weight as far as how this might be perceived, because there's one thing to get embarrassed in the 1 o'clock window and get talked about the next day, but you're in this gaggle of games. When you're just standing alone there, naked in front of the congregation, it's going to be really hard to hide from the discourse all day Friday if this team goes out and looks listless on a Thursday night football matchup against a Washington team. But still, really good defensively up front, has given people problems there with that group, especially in the middle of the D-line. And Sam Howell, while he's thrown, I believe, more interceptions than touchdowns at this point, has still put together stretches of really compelling football in an offense that seems like it's benefiting from Eric Bieniemy's presence. So I don't think that's all that far-fetched at this point for the Chicago Bears, even though Matt Eberflus seems like the least of, I mean, he's in the Zach Taylor mode of coach where I would have a hard time picking him out of a lineup at this point, even though we've been talking about his team so much for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it's not a reach to say that the Washington's a better team than Chicago, but it's not a reach to say Chicago could win this game. I mean, that's where these two teams are. They're both teams offensively are horrible. You mentioned defensively. I mean, that Chicago defense, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 0 fumble recoveries on the year. I mean, so there's a lot of problems going on with the Chicago Bears, but a lot of times it focuses in on the quarterback if the quarterback's not playing well, and also a head coach in this situation where they've had a lot of distraction, especially off the field with their D coordinator being gone. Again, another player in Chase Claypool being told stay away. I mean, when you're told to stay away from your facility, that is just bad. You got a safety and a cornerback that are out tonight as well because of injury. So it's looking bad for them, and it's just a matter of how bad everything gets before you blow something up. But you did see some positive steps by the offense last week. Again, they were playing a Denver team that had given up a 70 spot to Miami the week before. So I don't know how much you can gauge it, but all you can do is gauge it in the game you play. So do they have the ability in this game? Yes, offensively to do something, but their defense needs to step up. As we mentioned, Howell's the most sacked quarterback in the league. You have 2 on defense. Something's got to give, right? Either you get some pressure on the guy or the Washington O-line look like a bunch of all-pros holding out a team with only 2 sacks. So it's kind of a flip of the coin on what direction this game's going to go.
Junior, in its 100-year history, though, in the NFL, the Bears have never fired a head coach in the middle of the season. Hey, Bears currently own the number 1 and 2 pick in next year's draft, so perhaps there's a method to why they are losing at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part of this that we're going to wonder as we, talked about Randy Gregory and the Denver Broncos releasing him. Like, you do wonder if some of these teams are going to start to strategically look around and go, all right, well, things could be a lot worse. It's just still going to be the matter of, with that kind of capital on board, I know Ryan Poles is ultimately going to be the one making the decision, but Matt Eberflus is going to be involved in the conversation, and more importantly, he's going to be involved in bringing whatever young picks they bring in from those spots into this organization and coaching them up early, Dad. And that's the most concerning part, is the early returns on this. We haven't seen any indication that, with all the hope and promise, I mean, the Bears have to be I mean, to this point of the season, they've got to be the most disappointing team in football, right? From what the expectations were going into the year. I remember seeing Dan Orlovsky get skewered online for, I think, being misquoted a bit, but basically saying Justin Fields could be in the MVP conversation based on what we saw at the end of last season, his ability as a rusher, the fact that they brought DJ Moore in there. Khalil Herbert has looked really good. And in the preseason, we saw some of the flashes of, hey, gaudy numbers, not because Justin Fields had gone above and beyond, but because those passing weapons and because the other weapons on offense had displayed some big playability. We had at least seen signs that, oh, okay, they understand what they've got here under the hood. And it still hasn't borne a lot of fruit early on in the season here. And most importantly, we talked about the failings defensively. That's what Matt Eberflus came over here as his side of the ball. And we always said the one-way ticket out of town for most coaches is, and we're seeing this with Brandon Staley at the Chargers right now, if you're supposed to be offensive head coach and your offense stinks, or a defensive head coach and your defense can't do the thing you were coached to do, that's usually an easy spot to people look at, go, all right, well, what exactly are we doing here?
Yeah, no, listen, I agree with you. And as far as the most disappointing teams, I think you have to look at three for different reasons, right? The Cincinnati Bengals, very disappointing considering where everybody thought. I had them in the Super Bowl. But you still say, man, there's too much potential and they're too potent to be kept down like this. So you expect there to be a turnaround. Another one, I think the second of the three is the Giants. Playoffs last year and looking nothing like that. A complete 180, and it doesn't look like, they're going to be able to find their way out of the hole, though you do have the thought of you'll get Saquon Barkley back at some point. Can you make this a palatable season or not? And then the Bears. Yeah, everybody thought it was going to be a bit of a turnaround season for them. I certainly did. I was in the camp of keeping Justin Fields, and I'll continue to say, well, when you're this bad, there's a whole lot of problems. But we always talk about the quarterback being the most important position. So they get sometimes too much praise, sometimes too much blame. That old, cliche saying, yada, yada. You hear it all the time. There's tons of problems on this team. And the issue is going to be is like in New York, if they don't play well and if they can't turn around, Brian Daboll's not going anywhere, right? No. I mean, Brian Daboll is going to be the coach of that team. I don't think there's any question at all about that. But in Chicago, I mean, it's just one big question after another. We're already 0-4. We don't look good now. Could we start to turn this thing around? Nobody walking through that door, as they say. This is our team. This team has to get better. Can you tinker during the season? Have a different guy call plays? Do you go all the way to get rid of your head coach? Make that kind of change. They're the team in most flux of these three teams we're talking about, Cincinnati, the Giants, and Chicago, about we thought they were on the rise a little bit here. Now we may have to have a complete reset. And if we do, when is the reset? Is it 6 games in? Is it 10 games in? Or as Emerson said, they've never fired a coach during the season. Do they let it ride for the season and wait till after the season and then do a complete reset?
I mean, hell, I guess if we're really going to round this out, the Broncos probably also have to be involved in that, right? Like, I don't know maybe if the expectations were super high, but Sean Payton came into the season blistering hot with his criticism of the prior staff. You had him basically saying that same interview, by the way, if we're not a playoff team this year, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. That was the expectation that he set himself, which what else is he going to say but with that kind of bravado and this thought that, oh, Sean Payton came out of retirement for this job and was going to resurrect this quarterback and do all these things. For them to have their only win of the season be against this hapless Bears team that we're talking about, not exactly a ringing endorsement of a team where Russell Wilson hasn't been the problem. It's been literally everything else, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree, but they're a team that stunk last year, and I thought this year would stink maybe a little less. You're right. Sean Payton, what is he going to say? He's going to say exactly what he had to say, and that's, if we don't make the playoffs, I'll be disappointed. I don't think that any one of us thought that Denver was going to be in the playoff hunt, though you never know. There are surprises, but I just thought they would stink less. I looked at Chicago as young team going in the right direction. Cincinnati, I had them going to the Super Bowl. Giants, you're building off the playoff team from a year ago. So I thought that's why I put them as really the major disappointments. For Denver, it was kind of, you should be able to be better than what you were last year.
Do something.
But how much better, we'll see.
We will see. All right, you know what? Coming up next, if we're doing the biggest disappointment teams, let's do the biggest surprise teams in the NFL and 2 words for you guys that we have to get to the bottom of. Diaper jerseys. That's next here on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Reminder, coming up in the next hour, we got Carlos Boozer stopping by with us. We've got mailbag questions from you at GoJo and Golic on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, drop the questions in the comments. If you got them, we'll get to as many of those as we can in hashtag Grill Golics coming up here in the next hour. Dad, I want to get to, we talked about the most disappointing team in the NFL season so far. I want to get to the biggest surprise team we've seen through the first 4 games, ostensibly the first quarter of the season. But it's very rare at this point I stumble on something from your playing career that I didn't know about at this juncture. Like most of the stuff we throw to, I've heard the story told somewhere. A lot of people have heard it from the Mike and Mike days here. This is one I can't remember ever hearing about. I don't remember how we got, I can draw the through line of how we got to this subject before the show, because we were talking about fines being handed out, the ridiculous notion that Jamal Adams might face discipline from the league for berating the unaffiliated neurologist on the sideline after he was concussed by Daniel Jones in that game. Because he was concussed. Like, if the NFL does that, it's ridiculous. They should be ashamed of themselves. A guy who is acting out because he just got banged in the head with your reputation in the league for concussions and the way you've dealt with them would be an insane PR blunder, the likes of which we haven't seen. I guess it shouldn't say that. We've seen plenty of them.
Yeah, we've seen plenty. Yeah.
But that got to the time you got fined for an apparel violation in the NFL. And then you decided to tell us something I've never heard before, that apparently they tried to essentially send you guys out there in onesies for a little while.
Yeah, they did. They had buttons at the crotch, basically, that you would button your jersey. Yeah, and so that they would stay tucked in. That was the way for the league. Again, they wanted your socks pulled to the right height, and they wanted your jersey to not be untucked. So, which obviously is not the case today. So yeah, it tied at the crotch, so your jersey would stay tucked in. So most of the time we never button those things.
I was going to say they were sending you out there in like a bodysuit.
Yeah, you get a little, tug and grab there. You weren't really excited about. But I did get fined in Miami for having my shirt untucked. My jersey was untucked, and the ref told me to tuck it in, and I didn't. And he told me to tuck it in, and I didn't. And then another time he told me to tuck it in, and I told him if he wanted it to tucked in so bad he could effing tuck it in himself. It wasn't the smartest thing in the world to say. So I got a fine. I think it was $3,000 or $4,000, something like that. But still, I'm a guy not making a ton of money. Your mother was pretty mad at me for losing some money. So for my way to appeal it, right, because that's what you want to do as a player, you don't want to pay the full fine. So in my way to appeal it, I said it was the jersey. the jersey was cut wrong or whatever, and the jersey, it was the jersey. Don't fine me all this money. I'm making crap up to not get fined as much. Well, there's a domino effect. The equipment manager, Bobby Monica, who was a great guy, loved that man in Philadelphia. And I came in as a 9-year vet, so I got along with him. So every morning I'd go in there, we'd have a cup of coffee, he'd have some treats in there. And I had, full carte blanche in there to come and go and chat with him and sit and hang out. After I did that, Mike, I went to practice one day and I went by the equipment room. My picture was on the door with a line through it saying I was not welcome to come. And I realized, man, in my effort to not get fined in complete. And by the way, I was completely lying about the jersey it was the jersey's fault. It was my fault. Wow. I didn't realize the consequences of it from my buddy at that point, who then was mad at me. And I had to do a whole lot of, butt kissing there to get back in his good graces. But yeah, carte blanche in there. And all of a sudden my picture is on it with a line through it saying I'm not allowed in that room anymore.
What a horrific teammate. Talk about someone you don't want in the foxhole with you. The minute the going got tough, you got the hell out of there and threw him right under the bus.
Here's the thing. If I had to choose, and it was the mistake of what it cost me there, but the wrath of your mother and the wrath of the equipment manager, I chose the wrath of the equipment manager, okay? Because I don't have to live with him. I had to live with your mom, who was mad at me for losing that kind of money.
I was going to say, I guess both of them technically control your wardrobe. I mean,
before
that's exactly right. Having his Kohl's outfits picked by his wife. That was my father, who has literally everything he's ever worn picked out by my mom.
In the fashion world, this is known as a snap crotch bodysuit. Okay.
Yeah.
There are plenty of these in my household. My wife loves to wear these things. And I must show you this. Look what I just found. A men's leotard bodysuit, Billy. Slim fit button-down shirts with a snap crotch, and it's briefs nightwear. So really, above the waist, it looks like you're just wearing a golf polo here. But no, snap crotch right down there at the bottom, all right?
Yeah. Well, again, so it won't come
$18 on eBay. Yeah. That's incredible.
That's what they wanted. They didn't want our jerseys to come untucked. There was no way I was buttoning that. There was no chance that was happening. I was not buttoning that thing in the crotch. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, bud.
In a world where I thought Dan Orlovsky era UConn Huskies wearing Aeropostale jerseys was like the most significant fashion moment of our lifetime, I feel like we have completely erased this portion of NFL's history. We do so much with the jersey tech and all the different technology around there. The fact that at one point that I would have paid the hilarious visual of a bunch of grown men in the world's foremost combat sport having to go around and potentially snap under the crotch, walking around like a bunch of babies at daycare before they're about to go out there and harm each other is one of the funnier visuals on earth.
I just see the boys sitting around on Sunday on the couch, mashing beers and guac and wings, and we're all just wearing snap crotch bodysuits.
Hey, listen, as a guy that bought in on the romp him craze and had a couple of those in the holster, I'm not above it. Not above it. So we will see if anyone else can pull that out of the repertoire there. Dad, let's try and pull this segment out of the gutter here.
Please.
The most surprising team the NFL through 4 weeks. I think it's a pretty easy answer, Dad, and maybe this is just because I'm drunk on the vibe, similar to the way it was with the Detroit Lions, but we didn't even do this with Hard Knocks with this team. The Houston Texans, to me, storming out of the gate the way that they have. I was one line off of my early season prediction of Bryce Young being a guy to go out and maybe challenge Cam Newton's single season passing record, or at least join the 4,000 yard club for a rookie quarterback. CJ Stroud appears to be that dude. And when you've combined him with an offense that, oh, by the way, is going to get Tyus Howard and their tackle situation figured out here pretty soon. And offensively, I mean, you just look around the effect all across that team. Defensively, what they've done under Miko Ryans. Offensively, you could see that wide receiver room is young, blocks well. Nico Collins and Tank Dell have been great, but the Robert Woods effect of a group of wide receivers that are gritting it out, going out here and blocking down on pin and pull runs, working hard in that. Overall, this has been a team that, like we said, not in the AFC South that's 2-2 and has all these things to play for. Looks like as live a dog as any. And Dad, if we're going to predict things that we buy, because I understand the first quarter can sometimes be an incomplete sample size. We've seen plenty of players and teams nosedive after this. I don't know if I see that for the Texans at this point. One, because of the division they play in, but two, because none of it's been like fluky. Like Bobby Slowick has done a phenomenal job as the offensive coordinator for this team, and it seems to be sustainable. None of this has been flash in the pan stuff.
I think one of the biggest things you're getting out of it, and by the way, they play the Falcons this week, and you could have your top two offensive rookie of the year candidates in C.J. Stroud and Bijan Robinson. And I think we thought that about Robinson going into it, and we weren't sure which rookie quarterback would make that step up. And it's been C.J. Stroud, a guy who, still at in a division, as we talked about, where everybody's 2-2, but the NFC South for the Falcons, kind of the same way of what's going on there, save for Carolina. But you have a guy in C.J. Stroud, a rookie who hasn't thrown any interceptions yet, 6 touchdowns, a mixture of young and old on that team, especially the mixing in of a young coach who the players love. I think one of the most important things you're getting out of this, Mike, and again, it's the quarter poll. I get it. So we have a little bit of time yet, but it's a team where, because rookie quarterbacks, you have to wait and see. Where's the swing and the hit? Where's the swing and the miss? And we've seen swings and misses, especially with a team like the Jets, really with their last 2 between Darnold and Zach Wilson. But right now, I think everybody in that locker room thinks we have our guy. 4 games in, probably 3 games in or less, they thought, we have our guy, now let's build.
It's been incredible to watch. To feel good about that team overall for the first time in a while has been an absolute joy. At GoJo and Golic on Twitter if you've got a team that's been a bigger surprise so far than the Texans. Coming up next, though, why I've never been more sure that Kirby Smart is ready to take over at the head of college football.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's take a gander at the top 25 in college football. We got some movers, we got some shakers. Georgia, though, still chilling at number 1. Florida, Kansas dropping out. Kentucky, after that win over Florida, jumping in. And Louisville now undefeated. I believe it's the 3rd straight week, guys, that Notre Dame will be playing in a primetime game against an undefeated team, but a lot of critics calling this a down year for the SEC, but not if you ask Kirby Smart.
I think every SEC team should be ranked. I guarantee you there's some teams that don't want to play them that are ranked. I mean, I literally have no idea what you're referencing, because every team we play in the SEC is good enough to beat us. And whether they're ranked or not, I could care less. I'm trying to be more physical than them and outscore them. And it's the only thing I'm concerned with, not their ranking.
Okay, it's interesting coming from Kirby Smart there too, because I don't know about you, GoJo. Like, I'm still waiting for that all-out kind of blowout that reminds me and other voters out there, not that I'm a voter, that Georgia is still the team to beat, right?
Yeah, or to his point, because Dad, looking at this from Kirby Smart, Emerson's absolutely right. This team has failed to match the dominance of the prior 2 years that we've seen from Georgia. Although you could argue at the beginning of last year, there was a lot of playing with their food coming off of one of the best championship defenses we've ever seen. All the things that 2021 Georgia team was. But when you look at them relative to their counterpart, because I think Georgia and Michigan came into the season in very similar positions. While Michigan returned more of their production from the year before and their quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, both of these were teams that had high floors, were teams we expected to make the playoffs, especially because of their schedules. Michigan's looked like the more dominant team so far, or at the very least more consistent. I likened them to what the 49ers have done in the NFL through the early portion of the season. They look the part, and so we feel like we can trust that, even though they still really haven't played anybody. No disrespect to Nebraska or what they are right now. But, Dad, this from Kirby Smart in the midst of everything that's gone on with their season so far, where you played a way too close game for people's comfort against South Carolina. You had to come back against Auburn this past weekend, and now you're getting to face hell in the cell that is Ray Davis, the Kentucky Wildcats, everything running back, probably the best back in the SEC right now. He's gone out here and cemented his status as the new Nick Saban, because this is classic Saban era Alabama politicking right there. When you've got to go in, when you've got a team that right now is still trying to find itself early in the season, has been banged up plenty in the backfield along the offensive line. He's gone out here and saying, what are you talking about? None of y'all still want a piece of the SEC. Let me go and pound the drum, chant the 3 letters, and get on here, Dad. So Kirby Smart, understanding you got to also play the game when you're now the final boss of college football as they are currently situated.
Yeah, and they have a decent amount of teams in the rankings, but a lot of them more on the lower part of the 25, where the Pac-12 is really taking over more in the upper part. I listen, I get it. I get he's going to say that. I completely understand that. You know, with the SEC year in and year out has been the conference that has had the most depth. As we said, we may be looking at the Pac-12 for that this year in their lame duck year. So it doesn't shock me that they say that. And yeah, they haven't had those blowout wins. And it does look like Michigan is more consistent, though. Bowling Green, East Carolina, UNLV, you know, to start it out, you know, the 3 games Harbaugh had to miss with his suspension. And then, you know, the lower part of the Big Ten is not, you know, extremely competitive at this point. So it's outside of the, you know, whenever you talk about conference games, it's just where those teams are in the conference, because the schedules are set. If you want to get on a team for a non-conference schedule, you can do that. But, you know, as far as the other ones, sometimes some teams in the Big Ten are better, sometimes they're worse. And you get Michigan's getting some of these teams in a down year, but they'll have their tests against Penn State and Ohio State, as we said. I like this year for the fact that I wish this year was the first year we had the 12, right? Because do we have a dominant team right now, or what are the dominant teams that we don't think going on down the line, where we like what Washington is doing and they're sitting at number 7, Oregon at 8. I mean, 11 is Alabama, 12 is an undefeated Oklahoma team. So I wish we had it this year. We don't. We won't get it till next year. But I do think there's a number of teams who could pull this thing off.
Well, and I think, Dad, conversely, the conversation for the SEC this year, because of what you brought up there, the out-of-conference schedule, this is as vulnerable as they look. The reason Kirby Smart has to go out here and say this is because right now they look like a one-team league. Georgia looks like their only hope, because while you look in the conference, you've got still overall undefeated Kentucky, undefeated Georgia, undefeated Missouri. Everybody else has taken some sort of losses at this point. I mean, LSU's already got 2, a team that was coming in after a trip to Atlanta in year 1 for Brian Kelly last year. year and has had a defense that's been hot and cold and chose the wrong day against the wrong Lane Kiffin-led team to go out there and do that. The week after, we saw Lane Kiffin in that offense bottled up by an Alabama team that seems like one of the lesser in the Saban era that's got an out-of-conference loss against Texas. You look at Florida, out-of-conference loss against Utah. You look at Texas A&M, out-of-conference loss against Miami. LSU, out-of-conference loss against Florida State. Like those early season games that sort of set the table mentally for conference perception that have so long been dominated by the SEC. We're used to watching Alabama boat race Texas in one of those off-site games. Georgia dominating Oregon like they did the other year. And instead, we've got a conference where everyone's looking around and going, all right, well, you're not so scary this year. And so why are we going to believe as these teams get into conference play and start to beat up on each other that it should be anything other than Georgia going ahead here, Dad? Because I saw this the other day. I think it was a poll that Joel Klatt put up about teams already thinking about the potential for some playoff resume conversation amongst teams in college football, to your point about the expanded playoff. And they brought up a couple of scenarios in here that I'm trying to find furiously right now. And not necessarily.
Don't you love when that happens?
All right, here it is. Joel Klatt put these up. These scenarios that we imagine in October rarely come to fruition. But if you picture a world where one of the following three has to be left out of the college football playoff, and he went with the following: a one-loss Pac-12 champion, a one-loss Big Ten champion, or one-loss non-conference champion Georgia. Dad, the easiest answer, I think, there is one-loss non-conference champion Georgia at that point, based on their schedule, certainly, which once they took Oklahoma out when they were getting ready to join the SEC, became really a nothing burger for a lion's share of the season. I think either of those other two options get in well before Georgia, unless they start cooking in a way that right now hasn't seemed like what this team has in the arsenal this season.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what we're waiting to see. You know, it's always what they say. If you're going to lose early, don't lose late. So we've had teams lose early, out of conference. So how can they come back in the conference? So plenty of ball to go. I'm wondering what you think is maybe the most surprising team of playing well. You know, I'm looking at a couple of teams like Texas, Florida State. You know, Texas had 5 losses last year, and they're sitting undefeated now this year. I think I would probably lean to them as one of the teams that hasn't been in the mix the last few years, and now all of a sudden is right in the mix. I mean, Washington, they only had a couple of losses last year, I think. They ended up in the final ranking. So did Florida State. But Texas, I think, was down at the bottom right at 25, but 5 losses. So they seem to be the one team that maybe is making the most noise of the teams that didn't in the last few years.
I think Texas is probably, in terms of year-to-year improvement, and we expected them to make a big jump based on the amount of talent that Sark has got in Austin. But they've definitely looked like, I mean, that you could argue, Dad, Texas is the best team in college football right now. Like, Georgia's going to be number one until further notice, until they go out there and really lose it. But Texas has one of the best wins in the young season. They went out and really baptized Kansas this last week. That's a Kansas team. Lance Leipold's got a really good squad. Jalen Daniels is a really good quarterback. We like and respect all the things about that Kansas program, but Texas went out there and made a mockery of a spread that was already up near 21. I think it was 16.5 going into that game. And Texas put that on them a week after, also not messing up and not stubbing their toe against a Baylor team that's a little bit of an enigma to start the season right now. So you can make the argument with them. But to your point, Dad, we expected them to be good. We expected Penn State to be good this year. Florida State, we expected to be good this year. It was them and Clemson talked about neck and neck in the ACC for what they were going to be this season. On and on down the list, you get probably down to 14. I would say Washington State might be a little bit of a surprise for some people, undefeated right now. We've heard from Coach Dickert plenty about the defiance of that program. I got to say, the most interested I am in a football team going forward, and really the coverage of a football team going forward.
I know where you're going.
The Miami Hurricanes.
Yeah.
Undefeated right now, ranked 17th in the country, have an out-of-conference win against Texas A&M, and nobody has seemed to care. Like, I understand I'm probably feeding into the Dan Le Batard show propaganda. They're probably going to love this. Mike Ryan, Golden Kane, going to be lapping this up, that a Notre Dame guy's offering this up, but I'm genuinely curious because they're going to get in 2 weeks, Dad. They'll start the stretch of their schedule where if we're going to talk about them, and we will, it's going to be because of what they do back-to-back weeks against North Carolina and Clemson. Right. But you look at this team, sturdier in the trenches. You go back and cut on that Texas A&M tape, good on good, in a system in that offense that's spread out, puts them on an island a bit on that offensive line. Held up really well against a bunch of talented guys at Texas A&M, but as important as anything, Tyler Van Dyke looking like the dude we saw in 21, especially in terms of downfield passing. That deep ball is back, and it is effective. And this is one of the teams, Dad, kind of like we talk about with Texas, where it feels like there's always an appetite for them to be good. The U being back, that, four-letter word that gets thrown around in college football all the time, is something people kind of salivate at. And for a quarterback whose name we knew, who we loved in 2021, who talked his junk, who went out there and put it on, had one of the better ends to a season we've seen from a college football quarterback in a while. I figured people would be chomping at the bit for their revival because college football is chock full of plenty of teams who haven't really played anybody, and Miami's schedule, especially outside of Texas A&M, lends itself to that. But I've been stunned at the lack of national attention the Canes have got.
They've scored 38 points, 38 or more points in every game this season, Senior.
One thing I'll say, though, is Texas A&M really a big win anymore? I mean, I
they're
know
still a ranked SEC team with a ton of talent. Like
they were.
I
They're
get
not.
that
They're not ranked
classically
anymore.
disappointing, but
yeah.
again, even just in the perception of it, Dad, right?
I guess the perception, yeah, but I think in practical application, they're not as good as people think. They're outside the rankings right now. And like we say with most of these teams, you're going to find out, right? Because as you mentioned, back-to-back North Carolina and Clemson, and then later on back-to-back, it's Florida State and Louisville. So, I guess we'll put it this way. They're going to have their chance to prove themselves on the national level, because we say every year, Texas is back, and they haven't been. Well, now it looks like they are for now. Miami is back. The U is back. College ball is so much better when the U is back, and we haven't had it. But we'll have a chance for them to see that, to see if they are back this year. Best win this year. Would you say the best win was Texas at Alabama or Ohio State at Notre Dame?
I would probably say right now,
Ohio State, Notre Dame.
I was going to say Ohio State's probably got the best singular win of the season so far. I mean,
Bama's not Bama, dude. Bama's not Bama.
They're not Bama, but I also think, like, we left Bama for dead. I'm not going to be shocked if that team all of a sudden starts to do something. I think they're going to lean a little bit more into their identity of what they can be as a rushing team with Jalen Milroe at the helm. And defensively, again, you just saw Ole Miss score 1,000 points. I think they scored 15 against that Alabama defense a couple of weeks before, something in that range. So I'm again, and this is Nick Saban's brainworms as someone who's got his boot marks tracked up my back after 2012. Maybe I'm always going to be a little bit deferential to the king there, but I still think that is one of the best wins of the season right now. It's 1A and 1B in terms of what Texas did on the road. Again, right? Like, you're going on the road at Alabama. I was there for that environment, college game. I mean, it was very similar apples to apples comparisons for both teams. Right now, Notre Dame currently the higher ranking, and so you give the deference to them. But I would say both of those, Dad, probably up there for it, right? Florida State probably has two of the better ones overall, because that Clemson team, while they don't have a number next to their name right now, talent-wise, especially defensively, they're still dudes on that team. That's still an impressive win in a lot of ways for me, even if Florida State kind of throwing up all over themselves against Boston College the week before maybe tempered some expectations for people.
Yeah, I guess the reason I may lean to Ohio State is Texas. I mean, they're both on the road, Ohio State going to Notre Dame, Texas going to Bama. Is Texas had the same quarterback, and a quarterback who, by the way, the year before was playing well against Alabama before he got hurt. Same guy coming in. Ohio State had a new quarterback, a guy who had not really been tested at this point, comes to the hostile environment of playing at Notre Dame and plays well enough for that team to win. I thought that was a big boost mentally for Kyle McCord. So that's one of the reasons I put that win up there. It is right with Texas. I mean, it's pick one. I mean, but those are probably the two biggest wins of the year, both coming on the road in those games. So I don't know. I think as we normally say with all these teams, whenever we talk about it week to week, because we need to talk about something week to week, it all gets played out because you just start looking at the schedule and all these teams match up. We talk about every year the Pac-12 knocking each other out. Utah already feeling the sting of that, and it's going to happen in the ACC, and we'll see about the SEC what's going to go on there. But that's what's going to normally happen is that they start to wear each other out. The more top-heavy one is the Big Ten, where the three top teams are all on the same side, which which is just brutal with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, but all do their little round robin of playing one another. So we see where it lands.
And listen, Notre Dame also firmly in the round robin as far as teams in the top of college football that are going to have their chance to have it out on the field.
Yep.
And Dad, it's funny. I've gotten asked a lot this week about how this stretch of Notre Dame games affects a team like this, where you've got, as Emerson pointed out, 3, and it's likely going to be 4 straight night games against an undefeated opponent when they face USC next week in South Bend. How that affects a team, the emotional toll of having to be on like that, night game, college game day, back-to-back weeks that they had. Now you go on the road again to a place where Sam Hartman, the last time on Dragon Ball Z against Louisville, had one of his blow-up games of the last season, a ton of turnovers. I almost think it works in the opposite direction, Dad, where if this were another team and it was a 3:30 window and there wasn't a ranked team and they weren't undefeated, there's another potential for that look ahead kind of game like you had Central Michigan before Ohio State, where it's that trap game spot here. With Notre Dame, your senses are dialed up at a 10 right now all the time when you've got this many quality opponents in a row, because you don't cut on the tape and see a team that's drastically inferior to you and have that natural human response of, oh, maybe you exhale a little bit. It's another great coach in Jeff Brom, who did a lot of stuff, punched outside of his weight class at Purdue while he was there, and now has this Louisville team believing very early, much in the same way that we just saw with Mike Elko last week. So, Dad, I don't know if you ever had a stretch like that where it was that many. I mean, in the NFL, it's like that every week. And so maybe that speaks to that consistent approach that you've got to take in this.
I didn't have it at Notre Dame. My best year, I think, was 7-4. Didn't have great years here. You always know you're going to get your opponent's best, but we were never one of the better teams. Outside of my freshman year, we got preseason number 5. We won. The number 1 team lost. We were number 1 and number 2. We were number 1 in the country the second week of my true freshman year, when we were like, wow, we are going to win national titles. And then we promptly went to Michigan that next week and got our butts handed to us. And like I said, we never finished more than 7-4. As I said, you're going to get your best game from opponents, but we were never in the position of being high in the rankings where we had to do it time and time again. These guys, and hell, you had that in 2012 when you guys went undefeated. You had 7 night games, 7 primetime games where you have to be on. And then the only way you can make it is by being voted in, because you don't have a conference. So that's where Notre Dame is now to get into the Final Four. So they know they have to be on. They know they have to win these big games, and it's there for them. So it is right there, as I'm sure Marcus Freeman is telling them. It's there for you guys. You guys got to go out and take it. But, man, time and time again, be up for Louisville, undefeated ranked team. Be up for USC, undefeated ranked team. They play Arizona. I think they're going to win, so they'll be undefeated and ranked when they play next week. And then play a team that's not ranked in Pitt, but Pitt always plays Notre Dame extremely tough. So, I mean, you got to be on your toes week in and week out.
This year's pick could be a drastically different story based on what's going on. Phil Dracovic just got benched this week. Christian Veilleux finally
been kind of ugly there. Yeah, I'm excited. Quite honestly, I know we'll talk more about it tomorrow. I'm excited for your game. You're going to Athens to call Georgia, Kentucky. Kentucky just putting on a show right now, and Georgia, not at its best, going to be a real interesting one.
Yeah, man, if you haven't tuned in, and this last week, if you don't know his name after what went on against Florida, 280 yards later, get to know Ray Davis. NFL fans, he's going to be one you want to keep your eye on there. I have been watching a lot getting ready in the lead up for this game. I don't know if I have seen a linebacker or a safety one-on-one in the hole with that man even be able to put hands on him. He's like trying to tackle the wind. And that is what he's going to be trying to do going up into the teeth of a Georgia defense that, oh, by the way, still pretty darn good, still pretty darn well coached in the middle of that. Kirby, outside of the politicking at the mic, still knows how to coach defensive football. Good on good coming up in Athens. Coming up next, let's get to great. Carlos Boozer going to stop by and join the show with us here on GoJo and Golic.
All right, so Carlos Boozer, best known for his career in the NBA, obviously. I covered him out in Utah. Dude was an absolute screamer. First ballot all-scream team. But the dude is also an Olympian, a sports commentator, businessman, and now author of Every Shot Counts, a memoir of resilience. So looking back at his all-star NBA career in the book, which, by the way, released in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook versions on Tuesday. It includes his relationships with stars like LeBron and Kobe, and recently he chatted about it all with our very own Golic Sr.
Joining us now, longtime NBA player Carlos Boozer and book writer as well, as his book is out. Every Shot Counts, a memoir of resilience. Carlos, appreciate the time today. I got to ask straight out, why the book, why now, and what drove you to this?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. You know, I just feel like I'm 41 and going to be 42 in November, and I lived a hell of a life. And I figured, you know, why not write it now? Hopefully get a chance to inspire some younger kids who are going through, you know, like say for example, you have a dream and you're trying to decide whether to keep going or to just quit and pivot and go a different direction. And I think, you know this, and everybody out there listening has had a dream at some point in time. Do you keep going when you hit a roadblock, or do you stop and do something different? So I wanted to write a book to hopefully inspire the next generation to keep going. You know, I think coming from Juneau, Alaska, I had a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah.
It wasn't an easy road to get to the NBA and beyond. And I mean, even for a quick example, like I remember, you know, 7th grade, you go in, your teacher says, hey, everybody write down what you want to be when you grow up. And I'm like, I want to be an NBA player. You know, I love watching the NBA, and my generation, obviously, I'm watching what Michael, MJ, and the Bulls are doing, and I'm like, I want to do that one day. And my teacher, my 7th grade teacher, was like, you know, you should lower your expectations and maybe work at Costco or the local grocery market, more realistic. And so think about being a 12-year-old kid, and this is your teacher at school, right, in 7th grade. So that can either deter you from continuing to go or motivate you. And for me, it was one of the first times in my life where I'm faced with non-belief in my dream. Because like at home, I had the belief. My parents were like, yo, we'll send you to every camp. Whatever you want to do, you can achieve it. And I go to school. And so I kept going. That was just an example of resilience early on, where I decided to not listen to my 7th grade teacher and keep pursuing the goal. Yeah,
that's amazing coming from a teacher. That really is somewhat shocking. And you're a guy born in West Germany, raised in Juneau, Alaska. And I have to imagine you're highly recruited. How difficult was that recruiting process? Either to you end up at Duke, way across the country, of coaches coming to you or you going to them.
Yeah, difficult. I mean, I think ultimately AAU and travel basketball made recruiting so much easier for a guy like me. Like, I didn't grow up in California or Illinois or New York. I grew up in Alaska. Okay, so it's a little bit of a hike to get up there. You got to go through some tundra, go buy some mooses, some bears, and a pack of wolves to get to me. But the cool thing is, in the summertime, I would link up with my travel team, EBO, that was based out of Fresno, California. And I go to all the tournaments we called it the lower 48 because, we're up in Alaska. Hawaii is obviously off on its own. So I would go to these tournaments in the summertime, and I would see Coach K and Steve Lavin and Roy Williams and all these coaches over the summer. And they got a chance to recruit me and scout me and take a look at me up close and personal. And then when it got to my junior year, I was the number one player in high school. Everybody made the hike up to Alaska to come watch me play and meet my family and see my background and talk to my high school coach, George Houston. So I was very fortunate and very lucky to be a part of travel basketball. So for a guy like me who had to travel so far to get seen, it paid off.
Yeah, and going to the NBA, you get there in 2002, you finish up in the NBA with the Lakers in 2015. We're getting ready to tip off another NBA season now. As a game, it's not that long ago you have been out, but it does seem like it goes through changes quicker than normal. Have you seen a big difference in the game since you left or while you were playing to now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the game has changed dramatically. It was such a power game when I got in the league. Guys like Karl Malone and Alonzo Mourning and, Charles Oakley. And now you got guys like Lauri Markkanen and, Joel Embiid and Joker. And the game has changed dramatically. And it's cool because from a skill set standpoint, you got big guys that can do what guards can do. Literally, Jokic runs the offense runs through the Joker in Denver, right? And Embiid can do everything on the perimeter that a guard can do. Giannis is, even though his three-point shot is continually getting better, he can do everything with the basketball and dominate inside the paint as well. So from a skill set standpoint, it's pretty impressive to see these guys and how skilled they are, no matter what size they are.
Any issues where I don't see how, I guess, but Damian Lillard tried to stay for so long in Portland, and finally, his time there ended. He ends up in Milwaukee, a guy that wanted to win it so badly in Portland, in an era where players move all the time. What's your thoughts of him trying to stay there as long as he could, but now ending up in Milwaukee?
I think it's honorable, man. I mean, he's such a star. He's been a huge star in a small market in Portland. They tried to partner him with a couple guys here or there, but nothing like the caliber that he really deserved to have a chance to win in Portland. And, enough's enough, right? Just like Kevin Garnett in Minnesota, he tried to stay there as long as he could. And then as soon as he leaves, he won the championship in the first year. We keep looking at a mirror of that with Dame going to partner up with the Greek Freak in Milwaukee. I mean, Giannis, they're every year Milwaukee is like right there. They're like a health of a person away from being able to go back to a title and get another one. Last year was Chris Middleton. And this year they upgrade their entire roster by getting Dame. No offense to Drew Holiday, phenomenal point guard, championship point guard. But Dame Dollar's a whole different level position player. And they gave up a lot. Don't get me wrong. They gave up a lot to get Dame over there. But you partner up one of the best guards on the planet with one of the best players on the planet. That's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not going to feel too bad for Drew. He goes to Portland and ends up in Boston. So,
he'll be contending too. Yeah.
It's exactly right. Kind of that deep Eastern Conference there. Back to your book, why Coach K writing the foreword?
He's one of those guys for me that's been obviously my college coach, my Olympic gold medal coach, but he's been a mentor, father figure, someone that I've always been able to tap into for advice. And the great thing about Coach K, at least for me, is that he didn't just recruit me at 17 years old. He stayed in my life well beyond the basketball court when I left in 2002 to go to the NBA. We talked on a regular basis, have a very close relationship, very close friendship. And for me, he's known me since I'm 17. That's more than half my life. And I was like, there's no better guy to write my forward than Coach K.
So you win a national championship at Duke. You 14 years in the NBA. You have an Olympic gold medal as well. You write this book, so all that you achieved, when people read this book, what are the main one or two things you want them to get out of this?
I would say the main thing is, having a dream, fighting for your dream and realizing your dream. And And Mike, as you know, it's not a smooth road. You know, I went through a lot of bumps. I went through a lot of bruises. I went through moments where I got knocked down and had to decide, am I going to get back up or not? And I tell those stories in this book. And it started off at a very early age. You know, I lost my best friend very early in life to some gang violence. And, you know, my parents got me out of Washington, D.C. We moved to Alaska. And then it was weird because everything changed in Alaska. There's not a lot of crime, definitely not gang crime at the time. And more doors started to open up once we got up there. So I would just say the biggest thing is, you know, if you have a goal, go after it. It's barely, more times than not, will it be a difficult road with some challenges? Take the challenges head on and go after it, because life is short. You don't know how many days you got on this earth, but make them worthwhile for you.
You ever get back to Juneau to visit?
Yeah, I try to go every summer, usually July or August. When the weather's nice. I try to avoid the winter as much as possible. That's why I reside in Miami, Florida. But I try to go back every summer to enjoy some of the summers.
Well, Carlos, I really appreciate the time. Again, every shot counts, a memoir of resilience. Look forward to reading this. It comes right out of the gate strong with you talking about your friend and passing away. I mean, and keeps going from there. So great messages in that, and appreciate your time.
Mike, appreciate it.
All right, so the NCAA Division I Council on Wednesday, check this out, approving a smaller window during which football and basketball players can enter their names into the transfer portal and still be eligible to play at a new school the following season. So the decision shaving the time frame from 60 days to 45. Gentlemen, GoJo, big deal, not a big deal? What say you, dude?
I think it's a big deal in that they're going to continue to tinker with this. It's an understanding that I think they're hearing coaches who have talked about the effect that this is having on them, the difficulty of having to continue to recruit your own players, and just creating windows that are smaller and smaller where this is something that you've got to tinker with, because it's new roster manipulation, Dad, for all these programs. And in a day and age where we saw what Colorado and I'm sure other teams are going to try and replicate, maybe on the player side, that also makes it easier too to try and get all this done in one fell swoop.
Yeah, so from the football side of it, in FBS and FCS, the 30-day window begins the Monday after the FBS conference championship games. You have 30 days there, and then you get 15 days the last half of April to make your decision. And I think a lot of players have already kind of decided if they want to go. It's a matter of what interest do they have in other places. It affects a lot of people. You sometimes only hear the names of the players that are doing something at the next school, but there's many more players who you're not going to hear of that made the right move or the wrong move by going into the portal. If you're in the playoffs, you get an extra 5 days to declare as well, which is always tough for them because there's always the declaring for the draft as well. So
yeah, exactly.
A lot of decisions that have to be made.
Yep. I think this is definitely one, though, that skews more towards the coaches. We've heard a louder chorus of people talking about the effect of all these different rules on college coaches. And so this one feels like a bone that's gotten thrown to them. Dad, it is also a great segue into a segment that we have said we are shamelessly going to rip from the Mike and Mike days. It is hashtag Grill Golics here. Any questions from you, all the fine people listening, whether it's on the podcast audience, the visual audience on YouTube, you can send those questions at GoJo and Golic or at Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter if you got them here. But, Dad, we got a bunch of good ones that we want to tick through from people here. And this first one comes from the YouTube comments here. This is from Sandman9701. With NIL money now prevalent in college sports, what are your thoughts on Caleb Williams saying he would play another year in college if certain teams had the #1 pick? Just an editor's note there. That was Caleb Williams' father that was talking about that out there and publicly. Dad, you, me, and Hawk had a conversation about this at the show in Kansas City before opening night, where Hawk, we were talking there, illuminating us on some of the real dollar values getting thrown around in college sports, the kind of packages that could potentially be put together that would actually make this a more realistic conversation than it's ever been. I ultimately think more so because on the NFL side, there's still a chance that the Bears or the Cardinals or any of these organizations that you view as hapless enough to not want to go and hitch your wagon to could still be the teams picking at the top of the following draft here, or that another bad team rises from the ranks just because of the structure of the draft. I don't think it gives you nearly as much of a play there, even if financially it's closer to being viable than it's ever been.
Don't see how it would happen. If you're going to be, you can't be any higher than #1, right? And if you're #1, you're going to a bad team. So, and it could be the same bad team, as you've mentioned, that you didn't want to go to in the first place. So I get it. There's great NIL money. I understand that. There's risk as well of injury going back, but you do have the money there. If you're going #1, we talked about years ago with Michael Vick. Could Michael Vick have used another year in college football? That there was no NIL then. Another year in college football to hone his craft a little better? Yes, but you're going #1. When you're going #1, you go #1. You go to a bad team and you learn and you grab it while you can. So I said it before, I'll say it again. If Caleb Williams is going to be the #1 pick, to me, there's no way on God's green earth he goes back to school.
All right, there we go. The God's green earth is out there in the mix. Let's go with this one from Ron in the Key on Twitter, hashtag Grill Golics. What would be the best contest for content between the Longs and the Golics? Dad, we get this comparison a lot. Similar structure in the family, football families, although we're more like the Costco brand Longs based on career accomplishments at every level by all the kids. I would honestly say, Dad, and this is unfortunately a shot at Chris Long here, golf might be our best chance because Chris doesn't really play.
Right.
Kyle's really dialed in, as silky a swing as you're going to see from a man of that stature ever. Between you being the most consistent golfer in our family, and I think me being good enough to beat Chris, who basically doesn't play, we might have a shot there, and golf content's hot in the YouTube streets right now. We might actually need to set this up.
I also think another way we can go is, with Chris and Kyle and Howie, and then me, you, and Jake, your brother Jake, pickleball.
Ooh.
Oh, no, here we go.
Because we're all dealing with injuries, all right? All of us, all 6 of us, especially your brother Jake now with his back. But if he gets that on the mend, All the Longs have had injuries throughout their careers. Howie and I are in the same age bracket. You guys are in the same age bracket. We kind of round robin, the three of us, how you want to make your teams, play a best of 5 or whatever, and go pickleball. Again, just like golf, not too much more movement than golf, but not like where, you're really exerting yourself like crazy to where hopefully none of us, blows out an Achilles or a knee. But pickleball might be a way to go too, I think.
There we go. Green light pod. Pick your poison, pickleball or golf, and we'll set it up and get the cameras. Dad, this one I think is very interesting from Roy Combs on Twitter. There's a 1-seater restroom at work. Men and women both use it. You walk in and there's pee all over the seat. Do you clean it or leave it, risking the person walking in next thinking that it was you that peed all over the seat? I know my answer on this. I clean it off.
Wait, do you have to sit down? Like, depends on what you're going to the bathroom for. You have to clean it off if you're going to sit down and do a number 2.
Well, no, even if you're not going to sit down, to Mike's point, and I'm the same way, I clean it because I don't want the next person coming in thinking I left the toilet seat down and peed all over it.
Can't worry about that.
I'm cleaning it and making it look like, I did my thing and I was clean about it. So I clean it.
I'm the same way. Got to find a way. Got to get that done. I cannot deal with the shame on the other side of this. Dad, this one from Magwap, NY Till I Die on Twitter. I've listened a while now to Golic, and I heard he will never not watch Armageddon if it's on TV. Golic Jr., do you have one of those hashtag grow Golics? I'd say this, Dad, it's still Armageddon for me. Like, I won't pass up that movie right now. Every part of that. Liv Tyler and the, at the end of this, don't want to close my eyes, don't want to fall asleep. The scene with her and Ben Affleck there, Harry, I love you, him pushing him back inside of the bay while he goes out there to sacrifice himself for everyone out there.
Whoa,
Bruce Willis as Harry
spoiler
Stamper.
alert here. Spoiler alert.
Nah, it's too late, buddy. It's too late. That's 99. You've either seen it or you're not going to see it.
Isn't there more of a film in your different genres, Mike, that you like that I don't like that you would? Because I do it for that. I do it for Con Air as well. Your mother is absolutely disgusted with me when I stop on these, and she hears a song from one of the shows, and she just rolls her eyes and walks out of the room. There's got to be a different movie for you in this.
I mean, it's mostly all those movies that I grew up with you on that one, like Con Air especially. My favorite part of Con Air is the fact that Nicolas Cage went down to Alabama to study the dialect and get the accent down, only to come out and produce that accent in that movie. One of the worst Southern accents of all time. I'll also throw in there rom-com style. 27 Dresses is one of those movies that sneaks up the list for me. As a rom-com, Katherine Heigl, I think Gerard Butler Gerard Butler's not the other one. I'm thinking of P.S. I Love You with Gerard Butler, but no, 27 Dresses absolutely plays Katherine Heigl, a masterclass in that one there. Last one here, Dad. We only got about a minute left here. This one here, I'll ask you from AshFit1. What have you stolen from Junior that you do all the time now as a habit here? She asked, the trait I find myself doing now that I'm older, that's like you. I get frustrated with technology when I can't find the remote. I become my father's son. My dad would be on the warpath holding the remote, blaming all of us for losing it as kids. And now I have that similar fuse that switch. Dad, what have you stolen from me at this point now in your old age?
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's a tough one because you normally the kids have a lot of the traits of the parents. I overall, boy, this is going to be a cheap joke. I know what I stole from you is your hair. So.
Oh, don't do that.
Thank you for everyone who sent questions in, except for that last one. Coming up next, did anyone else get the text from yesterday? The national alert for the GoJo show next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Emerson Latzia. I'm going to try and land this plane with this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into your day. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating, and check us out right here on DraftKingsNetwork.com, DraftKings YouTube, Samsung TV Plus, and more, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. And tell a friend about it. Spam it in their inbox, text message them clips from this show. Do what you can and spread the word. We appreciate all of it. Dad, let's get to this. Thankfully, did you guys all survive the test of the national alert yesterday that went off here? Or did you get caught getting got like D'Amico Ryans yesterday in his press conference? Take a look at this.
It's everybody, not just me. When you think about how he's played left guard before, he's played opposite tackle, what do you think about in terms of his ability in that decision?
That's the answer right there. They don't want you to get that question out, man. We'll put the best 5 out there. We will.
What a great bailout for a coach at a press conference. Could have been on the receiving end of like a Pulitzer-winning question. I don't know if they give out Pulitzers for questions, but it could have been the best question ever. And if coach wanted to get out of it, he got bailed out by this test of the national alert system that we all heard billed for yesterday that apparently came a couple minutes early for a lot of people if they needed to deliver that message to anyone about some world-ending event. Guys, I barely noticed that as a blip on the radar. I was really not impressed by this test. If the nukes are hailing overhead and the end of humanity is nigh, I might have missed it rolling over in my sleep based on that weak ass alert.
Wow, I mean, listen, I knew it was coming and heard it. Your sister, was expecting, had a plan of putting the dog somewhere else so they didn't hear it. She thought it was going to go on for like 10 minutes. They're like, why would it go on for 10 minutes? I mean,
if this alert comes up, we're all going to die, I'd imagine.
And how long do you need to hear the alert? I heard the alert. I needed 10 seconds to hear the alert. I can look and say, the world's getting bombed. You're going to die. I'm like, okay, good. I don't need to hear that for 10 minutes to tell me the same message.
Now, the big issue here is D'Amico Ryans was probably planning on wrapping up his press conference at 2:20. That alarm, as you've already mentioned, Junior, arrived at 2:18. FEMA and our government can't even tell time correctly.
No, that's a fair point and a definite worry when it comes to this, and the reminder that they could just apparently access all our phones to do this all at once, which is also a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, but they enjoyed my internet search history.
Yeah.
Emerson not using the safe browsing mode here, living his truth in the light.
Amateur move on my part.
All right, guys, well, let's go from amateurs to professionals, Emerson, and get to that. We about to get real hungry up here as we have got robot burritos and one of the best chicken sandwiches I've ever seen.
Are we talking about professional robots now making our burritos at Chipotle? What the hell's going on here? And then you have the Braves also, because we got a two for one for you. The Braves introducing the chicken ain't nothing but a bird blues sandwich. I saw this pop up on my timeline yesterday, Golic, because you're the one who retweeted it. The sandwich looks unbelievable, but in terms of Chipotle here, I'm out on this, dude, because one of the best parts of going to Chipotle is, you maybe form a relationship with someone who's always there when you go at lunch, maybe sweet talk them a little bit. I don't know, throw them an extra buck or two in the tip jar, and you don't have to pay the extra $4 for double the meat because your boy back there is building that freaking burrito.
That's Emerson 100%. You took the words right out of my mouth here. This is just a way for them to skimp on even more of the product inside these bowls. I don't trust what's going on in there because you're right. You go there long enough and you put the time in. It's a relationship business between you and the people serving and making your food. I got a ton of respect for people in that line of work here who are making sure all of us don't go hungry. And when I get up there, I want someone to know and be able to assess. The robot eye is not going to be able to see, oh man, this is a big old boy right here. He's covered in sweat right now. He looks like he was just putting it working in the gym right now, trying to get those ass gains for the summer, trying to be caked up in the jorts. We got to make sure that he's well fed and maybe go a little bit of an extra heaping. It's that little love of a handful, especially on the rice, maybe on the beans mixed in there as well. God forbid the protein too. Dad, that these robot overlord maniacs just aren't going to be able to properly satisfy.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, sometimes I may want a little more of the, fajita veggies, a little less of the salad on top, and you can relay that to the person making your bowl for you, and they're most 99 times out of 100, they're gonna do what you would like to do. Where the robot is just doing what it wants to do. It's just anytime I hear robots starting to control things, I'm out. I'm just out. Because at some point, a robot with a brain is going to want to get rid of part of the population and mix a little something in that food that shouldn't be in there, that's going to hurt the person, and they're going to get a mind of their own, and then next thing you know, it's Thanos and half the world is wiped out.
Let's move on then to a better story in this chicken sandwich.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
So, the chicken ain't nothing but a bird blue Atlanta Braves sandwich. It's a double stacked fried wet lemon pepper free range chicken breast sandwich between not one, not two, but 3 glazed donuts and Southern Angry pickled green tomatoes, finished with a peach bourbon. I don't even know what that word is.
Kool-Aid.
And powdered sugar. Cooley. Yeah, there we go. God, I am white and
No, I just Googled it. I just Googled it 2 minutes ago how to pronounce it because I wasn't sure if I was going to have to read it or not, but I'm glad you did.
I do love donut sandwiches. I always pay for it on the back end. Like I've had donut burgers, I've had all that stuff. It's the perfect mix of sweet and savory, but Dad, it almost always wrecks shop on my stomach. That being said, I'm having a hard time talking because of all the water in my mouth right now. Lemon pepper does something to me physically. I bought lemon pepper seasoning a while back. I was putting it on everything. Eggs, you name it, it was going in there. It's a net positive. It's the universal solvent. It's one of my favorite things that you can do, especially to chicken. So this sandwich sounds like an absolute godsend.
I'm not usually a fan of mixing my sweet and my savory like this, but I do like chicken and waffles. So why wouldn't I like something like this? I can't fathom what this would do to my stomach. But I wouldn't care at the moment because I would be destroying this thing. It looks so damn good. I could not wait to get I try and eat it with my hands. Could you imagine eating that in your seat at the ballpark and what a mess that's going to make? But man, that's a mess I'm willing to live with because it looks awesome.
Eating this on a crispy fall day in North Georgia. Are you kidding me?
Oh, so good.
I mean, you're watching the best team in baseball try and go and steamroll their way through wire to wire #1 in this postseason, and you get to do it with that. Like Atlanta is ensuring that from start to finish, even for an Atlanta sports fan who is one of the most beaten down, battered groups of human beings on earth, for people that live around and love Atlanta sports, I'm glad that they're getting these nice things happening to them, at least in this realm here, because it seems like the Falcons might disappoint this fall.
Beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
God bless that. God bless the third, guys, as we get here. We talked about the NCAA changing rules around the transfer portal windows. One of the other things that they have also put up here as a proposal is ending the photo shoots. The FBS Oversight Committee has introduced legislation to prohibit during a prospective student athlete's unofficial visit, the institution arranging for photographs involving the student athlete and those accompanying the student athlete, which, Dad, is something I think coaches have hated for a while. It's an expense that was done because everyone felt like they had to, keeping up with the Joneses, all these kids in full uniforms, taking pictures next to expensive cars, Lane Kiffin out here balling, come to the SIP. But, Dad, this is the end of an era we've seen even parents jumping in on this. I remember so vividly a Florida recruit's dad, big old hoss that he was, in the full skin-tight Florida Gators Jumpman orange uniform there, that I will dearly miss if this does in fact get passed and go through.
This blows my mind. Am I a big fan of this? No. Do I care?
Yeah.
No. Does this affect anything?
Yes.
No. The NCAA is going to waste their time for 5 seconds. You wasted even 5 seconds of time on saying we're going to outlaw this. Is a pure, crystal clear vision of how the NCAA is so messed up that they give a damn about this, which doesn't mean a damn thing.
So does this mean no more Brian Kelly dancing with recruits too?
On official visits, you can still get that. So
great.
That part is at least saved. Coaches can enjoy that. We enjoyed you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.